I never thought a small flash of light would be the thing that would change my life forever. I was standing near the window one night, just looking out onto the sidewalk like I usually did when something caught my eye, a flicker, like a reflection. At first, I thought it was the glint of a car window, maybe someone pulling out of the driveway across the street. But when I turned my head to get a better look, my stomach dropped completely. There was someone standing right in front of my window, tall, still. Just staring. My heart started to pound, and it only took a second for my brain to recognize him. It was him. I opened the window halfway and said, as firmly as I could, "You need to leave. Right now. I do not want you here." He did not blink. He just stood there and said, in the most unsettling calm voice, "Let me in. I need to tell you something." I said no again, louder this time, trying to sound more confident than I felt, and I told him to go away before I called the police. He still did not move. But then, as he shifted a little to the side, I noticed something in his hand. At first, I could not make it out. It looked like maybe a flashlight or something metallic, but then he lifted it slightly, and the second I realized what it was, my breath caught in my throat. It was a knife. A real, sharp, glinting knife, and for a few seconds, I could not even move. I felt frozen. I told him again that I was calling the cops, and I started backing away from the window. But before I could even pick up my phone, he turned and ran off into the darkness like he had never even been there to begin with. When the police arrived, I was still shaking. I gave them the most detailed description I could, but it did not feel like enough. I kept wondering what would have happened if I had hesitated even a second longer, if I had opened that window all the way. I genuinely believe he came there to hurt me. I do not think he just wanted to talk. And what makes it worse is that I was completely alone that night. My parents were out of town, and there was no one else in the house. That made everything feel 100 times more terrifying. I found myself thinking, over and over, that if I had stayed friends with him, if I had not cut him off when I did, I might have ended up as one of the people he takes all his anger out on. Or maybe something even worse. But just when I thought that night was behind me, and I had survived something horrible, something else happened that made me question if I was ever really safe to begin with. About 2 months after that night, when I had almost convinced myself that the worst was over, I decided to try dating again. I figured something simple might help take my mind off things, so I downloaded a dating app, matched with a girl named Rachel, and we texted back and forth for about 2 weeks. She seemed cool, low-key, and we bonded over our shared love of horror movies. When a new one came out in theaters as some psychological thriller that everyone was talking about, we agreed it would be the perfect movie for a first date. I offered to pick her up, and she agreed. It was a Thursday night, at 10:15 p.m. showing at this older, kind of rundown theater on the edge of town. When I got to her place around 9:30, she came out wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, nothing too flashy. She seemed a little nervous, but sweet. Quiet at first, then opened up once we got talking about our favorite horror films growing up. The drive there was smooth, but I remember getting a weird feeling the moment we pulled into the theater parking lot. It was almost completely empty. Just a few scattered cars, and this weird flickering neon sign hanging crooked over the entrance. I joked that it looked like the beginning of a horror movie. She smiled and nodded, but I could tell she was thinking the same thing. When we walked in, the lobby was dead. One guy stood behind the concession counter, clearly bored out of his mind. I asked if it was going to be a full theater, and he actually laughed and said we were the only two who had bought tickets for that showing. I remember thinking that was kind of perfect. No crowds, no distractions, just the two of us watching a creepy movie alone. We walked into Theater 6, which was cold enough to feel like a freezer. Rachel pointed it out immediately, and I gave her my hoodie, which made her laugh and say I was already winning points. We picked seats in the middle of the theater, 4 rows from the back, dead center. We talked a bit while the previews rolled, and honestly, I was starting to think the date was going well. There was definitely some chemistry building, but right after the last trailer ended, just as the lights dimmed for the main feature, I noticed something move out of the corner of my eye. Someone had walked into the theater. No big deal, late arrivals happen all the time, but this person did not do what most people do. He did not look around, check for his seat, glance at his phone. He just walked straight up the steps, slow and deliberate, and sat in the seat directly behind me. I mean directly. Out of 100 empty seats, he picked the one right behind us. Rachel turned her head slightly and gave me a weird look like, is this guy serious? I shrugged and whispered, figures, but right away I felt it, that feeling, that pressure. Like someone was staring straight through me. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. But then I glanced back casually, and sure enough, he was not looking at the screen. He was staring at us. No blinking. No expression. Just this fixed, dead-eyed gaze. I whispered to Rachel, he is staring. She whispered back, I know. We tried to focus on the movie, but every few minutes, I could feel it again, his eyes locked on the back of my head like he was waiting for something. I turned my head again, slower this time, and got a better look. He was middle-aged, maybe in his late 40s, pale skin, clean-shaven, wearing a dark hoodie. But something about his face felt taken. Not just blank, like he was not mentally present. His eyes looked wrong. Not glazed over like someone zoning out, but sharp in a way that made my skin crawl. I whispered to Rachel again, this guy is really creeping me out. She asked if I wanted to move. I said maybe, but I was nervous. Where would we go? The whole theater was empty, and moving might just make it worse. A few more minutes passed, and then I felt it. A breath. A real, warm breath just behind my shoulder. Not loud or obvious, but slow and deliberate. I turned around fast, and he was leaning forward way too close. His face hovering near mine from behind my seat. I stared him dead in the eye and said, dude, can you not? He did not speak. He just leaned slowly back into his chair like nothing happened. That was it. I told Rachel we were moving. We got up and walked to the front corner row. The angle sucked, but we just needed distance. I could barely focus on the movie after that. I kept glancing over my shoulder every few minutes, and every time, he was still there. Still staring, and blinking. Around halfway through the movie, I heard footsteps, slow, coming down the steps. Rachel's hand grabbed my arm. We both stayed completely still. The footsteps stopped a few rows above us. We did not turn around. I held my breath, counting the seconds, trying to guess what he was doing. Then finally, he walked back up to the top row. I whispered to Rachel, we need to leave. She nodded. We grabbed our stuff and slipped quietly into the hallway. As we passed through the doors, I glanced through the small window in the theater door. He was standing now, in the middle of the aisle, still not watching the screen, still staring at us. We walked fast to the lobby and told the concession guy someone was acting extremely weird in Theater 6. His reaction froze me. He said, without hesitation, again? What do you mean again? I asked. He hesitated, then told me the guy had been showing up randomly for a month, always the late shows, never buys anything. Other people had complained too. I asked why no one had kicked him out. And he looked uncomfortable, said management said unless he physically touches someone, they cannot technically do anything. Rachel looked like she was about to cry. She asked if someone could walk us to the car. A janitor agreed. Thankfully, the guy did not follow us, at least not that night, but the entire drive back. I kept checking the mirror. What if he had followed us from a distance? What if he had memorized my license plate? What if he had seen where I dropped Rachel off? I had this lingering dread I could not shake. And what makes this story even more disturbing is what I found out about him 2 weeks later. About 2 weeks after that night at the theater, I was still uneasy. I had trouble sleeping, constantly checked my mirrors when I drove, and jumped every time a branch scraped against my window at night. It was not just paranoia, it felt like something had been left open. Like that man had stared too long and left something behind in my mind. I was determined to figure out who he was. So I went back to the theater during the day, not to see a movie, but to talk to the same guy at the concession counter. At first he seemed nervous, like he did not want to get involved, but when I told him I just wanted to know who that man was and if he had a name, he leaned in a little and said something I will never forget. He told me that they had nicknamed the guy Row 6, because no matter what theater or showtime, he always sat in the 6th row from the back. Always alone. Always staring. Sometimes at couples. Sometimes at people sitting by themselves. The guy never said a word to anyone, never bought a ticket in his own name, and half the time, they were not even sure how he got into the building. When they checked the security cameras once, they could not find any footage of him entering through the front doors. It was like he just appeared. I pressed him for more. Anything. Eventually, he caved and gave me the name of a manager who had been working there longer. I tracked her down through Facebook and sent her a long message explaining what happened. She replied the next day. Her message was short. 3 lines. I know exactly who you are talking about. He is not supposed to be there. He has been banned since 2019. I asked her what happened in 2019. She took 2 days to respond. When she finally did, she said she had only spoken about it once before. She said the man used to be a regular customer, quiet, reserved, never talked to anyone. Until one night, he followed a young couple out to their car after the late showing. No one knows what he said to them, or what exactly happened, but something triggered a panic. The girl ended up screaming so loudly that 2 janitors came running out. The man ran off into the night and was never seen again for over a year. They filed a report, even gave the police the security footage, but the guy was never identified. Then, sometime in 2021, he came back. The first time, he just walked into a theater during the last 5 minutes of a film and stood silently at the back. No one noticed him at first, but after that, he started showing up more frequently. Always during late shows, always alone, always staring. Staff members reported it, but every time police were called, he was gone before they arrived. And the weirdest part, every time someone went to review the camera footage to confirm he was there, something was wrong with the recording. Static, glitches, whole sections just missing, as if he had never been there at all. She told me she was eventually instructed to stop reporting it. Corporate did not want ghost stories affecting the business. I asked her if she thought he was dangerous. She replied, I do not think he is normal. Then she blocked me. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that night in the theater, every breath I felt behind me, every second he stared. And for the first time, I asked myself something I had been avoiding: was he even real? Rachel and I had both seen him. We had both felt him. But not a single piece of footage confirmed he was ever there. No name. No ID. No history. Just Row 6. A presence, a void. Something that watched people not because he was curious, but because he needed to. Like it was all he knew how to do. A week later, I deleted every dating app on my phone. Not because of Rachel, but because I was terrified I would end up at another quiet theater, another late night showing. And this time, he might not just stare, he might follow, he might speak, or he might finally do what everyone had always been afraid of. Some nights, I drive by that theater, just to see if his shadow moves behind the glass. I never get out, I just watch, like he watched me. And sometimes, I swear I can feel him watching still.